Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, I want to welcome everyone to session 91 of Faith and Calm, the Boston Women's Yeshiva of Faith and Calm. And tonight we're broadcasting from coast to coast. Well, I'm in Boston and Heskel Shimon is visiting his mother in Arizona, and he's going to begin in just a few minutes. So I want to wish everybody a very happy, I hope you had a very happy Tu B'Shvat. We're in the closing moments of Tu B'Shvat, which is a very lovely, low demanding holiday. It doesn't ask a lot of you, and it's just a very sweet holiday. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Yeheskel Shimon to begin. So Yeheskel Shimon, I'm going to double click on you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry for the fuzzy video. I am broadcasting from Phoenix. So this is class number 91. We're talking faith and calm, and where the subject today is living really with the power of now, living in the moment, in the present. But maybe we'll start out with a little bit of an introduction. Because it was a good story I heard from Rabbi YY this week, and I thought I would share it. So he was giving a Yud Shvat talk, and he was in Panoma, New York. And this guy walked into the Farbrengen where he was talking, and this guy's name is named Sammy Friedman. He says, "Well, I saw Sammy. This just reminded me of a great story about him and his connection with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Yosef Yitzhak." So the story goes as follows. It was 1950. There was a woman who the doctors were telling her, not only are you able to have a child, but you're going to have a surgery and have your womb removed. And she was very, very distraught about the whole thing. She went into the Frierdiker Rebbe in a few days before he passed away. She visited him. She told him what the doctors are telling, and they say, you have to have an operation right away. And he waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, you're going to be able to have natural children yourself." And 2 days later, next day, he passed away. So she got very nervous, and she thought maybe the blessing won't work. So she ran in to see the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Ramash, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, our current rabbi. And he said, "My father-in-law promised you it's going to happen. And so you don't have to worry. You don't have to listen to the doctors." And this kept going on for an entire year, going back and forth. The doctors say you have to have an operation, and she was saying no, because the Ramash is telling me not to. And then after a year, she gave birth, and that was this guy who walked into the room at that time. His name was Sammy Friedman. And then she gave birth again and again, 3 kids, perfectly healthy, and that was the story. And that's sort of the story here that we're going to try and elaborate on. The Baal Shem Tov says
she needed that operation to save her life, and she was
she never did it.
Business. And they told her she's fooling around with everything, and that and the Rebbe just kept telling her, if listen, if my father-in-law said it, it's going to happen. And she went into the Rebbe. I'm sorry, I'm going to add a little part. She actually went into our Rebbe, and she said, because one of the doctors scared the pants off her, and she went into our Rebbe and she said, "Do you know, I want to thank you for being such a nice person and being so concerned about me. But in this instance, I'm going to follow the doctor's advice, not yours." And then somehow he convinced her to hold on, and Baruch Hashem, thank you.
I mean, the guy was in the room. You can't argue with that, It was born from this lady, So he says, I thought I was inviting a lot of people, but you definitely should be here for a celebration of the life of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, because your existence depended on him. Literally, you wouldn't be in this room if you hadn't, your mother hadn't listened to what he said. So quite an interesting little story. Anyway, so this is sort of what the Baal Shem Tov says, that we look at the world and we see a natural world, and we think, yes, God can come and he can intervene and he can change the world if he needs to, but generally the world is nature. The Baal Shem Tov taught that we really have to teach ourselves to look at the natural world in a different way. We have to look at the natural world and the world around us as, it's all the same. It really is. Nature is really God constantly doing miracles, and he just happens to do them consistently the same way. For example, that the sun comes up each morning. That's a miracle. We don't see it that way. If it only happened once every 1,000 years, we would be very excited. Oh, wow, a miracle. The sun came up, or the fact that our eyes work, or that our teeth work, or that our heart beats, or anything else. But really, there was those miracles. And if they stopped working, we would spend a tremendous amount of money trying to get them to work again, But the problem is that we take nature for granted and we assume that this is obvious, happens automatically, and therefore it's not really a miracle. But the truth, the Baal Shem Tov says, the truth is nature is a miracle. It just happens to be that God is doing the miracle over and over and over again in the same way. And therefore, we don't really appreciate the miraculous nature. And I'm going to elaborate more on this so it becomes a little bit more grounded. So in this last week's Parsha, we had a story about this. It was interesting. The very last story about the Jews leaving Egypt, leaving what we call a gullus mentality and going into a geula, a Mashiach different mentality. The last stage that had to happen is there had to be something called the splitting of the Yamsuf, Kriya Yamsuf. And this is like a central piece in Judaism. The question is, there probably were other ways to leave Egypt. Why did he have to do this big miracle? So there's a Hasidic rabbi, name is the Noam Elimelech. He was the student of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the brother of Rabbi Zusha Anapoli. He lived in the late 1700s, and he explained it in a very interesting way. He says that the first time when we read about the Jews going into the ocean, into the sea, it says the Jews went out, b'yam b'yabasha. They went into the sea on dry land. But there's an interesting change when afterwards, after the splitting of the Yamsuf, what happens is it says the Jews went out on the dry land, b'yabasha b'toch hayam, on the dry land inside of the sea. And the question he raises, and other people do too, is why did you change the order? The first time it says the water first and then the dry land, and here it's saying the dry land and then the water. Okay, you could say, well, now that it dried up, it's on dry land. But why didn't he have to bring up the whole issue of it was on the water again? So he says, no, it's trying to teach you something. It's trying to give you a message about how you change your attitude towards life. When they first went in, it was a Yamsuf. It was completely impossible. It was beyond nature, and a miracle had to happen for them to go onto the dry land. But when they did that already, then they could walk on dry land and see it as a miraculous event itself still. That's the real trick, is to try and see your normal day-to-day natural thing to actually be a miracle. Now, scientists understand this. They understand it very well. The chances of our universe coming into being with life on this planet is probably a 1 with 60 zeros after it, if not even less likely. So it's a miracle. The fact that my eye works constantly is a miracle. The fact that I have 70 trillion cells and they don't argue with each other and they all do the right thing and they keep working, that's a miracle. There was one rabbi who said, oh yeah, it was Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He said that when Yaakov went to sleep on Har Moriah and those rocks were underneath his head, he said, this must be the house of Hashem. This must be the future temple of the Jewish people. And the question is, how did he know? And he said, he made a joke. And he said, because it says that the rocks fought with each other so that each one said, I want to be underneath the head of Yaakov. And he says, in a place where even the rocks are fighting with each other, that's got to be a temple, because that's what rules are like. There are always arguments. There's always fights among the Jewish people. So even if the rocks are fighting, then it must be. But that it is a miracle. It's a miracle that we have a system, a body, eyes work, ears work, and everything else. And we have to somehow look at these things and see, to tune into this miracle energy that's constantly available going on. Let me fill this in with a story. There is a famous Jewish musician, ex-rock star. His name is Peter Himmelman. Now today he calls himself Pesach Mordechai Himmelman. And there's some crosstalk in the background. If you want to mute what that noise is.
No, that was me.
It's you. Okay.
That was me. I was just saying, I didn't know that he's now using his Jewish name, Peter Himmelman.
Yeah. Pesach Mordechai. And he is the son-in-law of Bob Dylan. Now, in the 1980s, somehow he got connected with Rabbi YY's brother, famous Rabbi Simon Jacobson. And he started coming to the house every week. And he would have these, classes. He was interested, but he was also very much part of the hedonistic rock culture and so forth. And so when he saw this rabbi with the beard and the payas and everything else, he would oftentimes very mock Simon Jacobson. So he had no problems making trouble for him. And this was an incident like that, didn't mind it at all. So one time they were sitting in the house, and Peter Hillman actually tells the story, well, Pesach Mordechai now, and he said, he looked on the wall and he saw a picture of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he says, why do you have his picture on your wall? I mean, he's not a relative. So Simon tells him, he says, because I'm very impressed when I look at the Rebbe, because the Rebbe shows what is possible for a human being to turn himself into something. How he can make himself into something, what a human being can potentially become. He can be human, but he can also improve himself to such an extent. And therefore, I am very inspired when I look at the Rebbe and I see that. So Peter Hillman said, very cynically, he said, oh, you're probably one of those cult members. You probably believe that your Rebbe can fly in the air. And he was actually expecting Simon to reply very angrily and get angry. You're mocking my rabbi, and yell at him and so forth. But Simon responded. I heard Simon say this too. And he said, Simon said, actually, the truth is, I have no idea. If your Rebbe needs to fly, suppose he could fly. I don't know if he needs it. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. It's really not my business. But all I know is for the Rebbe, walking on dry land is like flying in the air. And Peter said he was very impressed with that because, if you can turn your average day-to-day life into something that's miraculous, if you can see the miraculousness in the now, in the present, then you actually can transform yourself. If you think that you have to somehow get out of this world, do something different, go to Iceland, do whatever you have to do to actually get happy, it's not going to happen. You have to know how to live in the present. And that is the second lesson that I think is important for now. And this is the message of the class. When the Jews left Egypt, right after the 9th plague, Moses is there, he's talking to Paro, and he says to Paro, he says, God's going to bring one more plague on you, and it's going to be the Makas Behoros, the 10th plague. And in the middle of this whole speech, before the 10th plague happens, while Moses is still standing there waiting for Paro's reply, what he's going to do. Yeah, you're going to give in or not give in. All of a sudden, God launches into this conversation with Moses about how the Jewish people have to start doing the first mitzvah that was given to them, which is sanctifying the new moon, Rosh Chodesh. There's a new moon, and it's going to happen every month, and you have to bless it, and you have to sanctify it, and you have to make it a holiday for you every time that the new moon happens, and so forth. And the commentators go, it doesn't seem to fit. Why is that so important right then to give an astronomy lesson? This is what the moon looks like, and it's when it's very narrow and it's thin, and this is the time to actually, it's big things happening here. The 10th plague is happening. It's time to leave Egypt. And you're talking about astronomy lessons at this point, God. So the answer is because that's the interesting thing about the moon. What is the new moon? It's full. It gets smaller, smaller, smaller. It looks like everything's going to end. There's no hope for it. And all of a sudden it turns around, the new moon happens, and things kind of getting light again and bright again and alive again. The message is very important to how to live life. And it was the first message Jews had to do, how to be really free. When we live in the past, and we're worried about what happened before, and all the things that happened before trigger us and bother us, and we never really seem to get over what happened yesterday, and this happened to me, and that happened to me, and we're still dwelling on it and so forth. We're not living in the energy and the power of who we are right now. We have to live today with what's going on. We can't worry about what they said at the office yesterday, the day before, or that this is all going to happen over again and over again and over again. We're not living in the present. And the same thing, we're planning too much about in the future, what's going to be when I'm in the old age home and what's going to happen with me there and this. You're not living now. You got to live now. So the blessing that I want to give everybody is that they should be able to live in the present with a pleasant energy. Not that we don't plan for the future, and not that we don't take lessons from the past, but really being a free person, going out of our Egypt, is living in the present. You have to tune into the present energy because that's the only thing you can do. And Mendel Futterfass once said that the most important person that you're ever talking, the time that you're ever dealing with, and the most important person you're talking to is the one now. You have to, the moment that the most special moment in your life is the right now. And the most important person that you're talking to is the one you're talking to right now. And the most important place that you're in is where you're now, because the rest are just not in your control. So means living now. It means this is being fully alive, is living in the present, living with the now, and being aware of what we're doing right now. And that means that will be then you walk on dry land, and it will feel also miraculous because you'll be in touch with the divine energy that's flowing through the world at this current moment. And with that, I'm going to
I have a
turn over.
question. How's that lesson from the moon? How did you tie in the moon?
So the moon is big, and but it's getting smaller, smaller, smaller. Things look hopeless and so forth. They don't look like they're going to, they're ever going to, they're going to turn around. My life isn't around. I'm still worried about the past, what's happening, or I'm thinking about the future. It's going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But the lesson of the moon is, you know what? Once when it seems the smallest, and when it doesn't, all of a sudden it starts growing back again. So we live in the present. We live in the present at the now. And somebody asked Rabbi why. He said, how can I, how do I put this to practice? And he says, this is the thing. Whenever you find yourself being triggered or worried or upset about whatever was happening, by what she said to me yesterday, or what she did to me yesterday, or this didn't happen to me yesterday, the trick is to try and start training oneself to live in the present and saying, okay, fine, that's how we did that. That may have happened many times before, but what can I do right now? Am I alive to the world right now? So if we got to help, we got some people still left online. I don't know who's here. Oh,
Yes,
Emily's
yeah.
here, Dina's here, Hadass is here, Mal is here. Very good. And then
Hi,
with that,
Dina. All
I'm
right,
going to
see you,
turn
Faith.
over the mic and the camera.
Okay.
Goodbye from Phoenix, and I'm going to
Okay.
listen in onto my wife's half of the
You are? You
conversation.
never do? Okay, good.
Yeah, but here I am. I can listen.
Here
Okay.
you are. Now in Arizona, you have nothing better to do. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Thank
So-
you, Yechezkel Shimon Yasher Koach, and have a
Thank
nice
you.
trip.
Somehow
Thank
we're
you.
both on
Nice
the
to
screen.
see
I don't know how.
All right, but you gotta turn me off the screen. Oh.
How do I do that?
Pin yourself.
I did. I double clicked myself twice, but you're still there.
It's let me remove pin. Okay.
Oh, maybe because you're the host? No.
No, you're the
Okay,
host.
doesn't matter.
So
Allowed
you
to-
have to hit pin on your thing. You have to unpin me and pin yourself.
I don't know. I don't know.
Can
where-
Right
just
click
move
on
it?
the window.
Pin. Oh, got
Okay.
it. Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Very
There you
good.
are. Okay, good. Now
Okay.
but I'm so big now. Okay, good.
You're
So
big.
anyway.
Yes. Yeah, you're big.
Okay, I want to welcome everybody tonight. I want to again wish everybody a happy. Today was Tu B'Shvat, and a day about trees and renewal and all good things. And I want to ask if anybody wants to say anything before I begin.
Well, I would want to give thanks for the dramatic conclusion, and safe conclusion for the hostages.
I
Uh,
absolutely thank you so much. Thank you
Unbelievable.
so much for
and I
saying
think
that. Unbelievable.
We have so
Unbelievable.
much to be grateful for.
It shows that you just never know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is what Hashem wants to happen. And if Hashem wants it to go one way, it's going to go one way, and another way, another. And it didn't have to be like this. It could have been horrible. So absolutely.
And law enforcement was tremendously patient, and I think it actually worked out favorably. Sometimes if they go in, it can cause more.
Mhm.
I don't know the way it just this time it worked out, which is really hopeful.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It was a potent lesson for me that, whatever Hashem wants is what happens. Okay. So this is session 91. And I'll start with the four things that I always say, which is
Could I add one more thing about
please,
that?
please.
I was giving it some thought today, and when you were saying whatever Hashem wants is what happens.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, what the rabbi did, I heard something today that when the person came to the temple and he asked to be let in, the rabbi let him in, kind of like Abraham let in the strangers in a way,
Mhm.
In the Torah. And he welcomed, and he made him a cup of tea.
Whoa.
And in the Torah, that was a very important thing to Hashem, that Abraham did that, that he stopped his conversation
Mhm.
with God to greet his guests. And
Mhm.
I was thinking that I wondered if that had great merit for the rabbi, because he did that, in good faith and everything. He did something very important, in the Torah. So
Mhm.
if that served, to protect him, to
Mhm.
protect them, but
It's an interesting
just a
point.
thought I had about it.
It's an interesting point. Um, I'm going to move my camera because for some reason, you guys are on the right side of my screen, and I want to see you all. Okay, so I usually start by saying four things. Number one, we're in extraordinary times, and by extraordinary, I mean that the Rebbe told us that we are living in the transition from exile to redemption, the redemption of the Jews and the whole world, and the redemption has actually begun. And the second thing is that you and I and everybody who's here was handpicked to be here, handpicked to experience this most dramatic, probably which will be one of the most dramatic, or the most dramatic episode, or maybe it doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe I should just say significant episode in human history. And I don't need any drama, frankly. And third, we have all the tools we need in order to do what Hashem for Hashem, what Hashem wants. We have the Torah, which is our guidebook. We have instructions from the Rebbe. We have instructions from the Torah. We have mitzvahs, which are our power tools, and we have everything. And the last thing is that what we're doing tonight is furthering the cause of the redemption, because the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, Lubavitcher Rebbe, who never spoke about himself in all the years we heard him speaking, he didn't use the word I, or virtually never. And he credited everything to his father-in-law, who was not alive anymore. And but the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1991, 1992 started dropping broad hints that he is Mashiach and that the grave will have no dominion over him. And anyway, so the Rebbe said that the fastest way to speed the redemption is by learning about it, and that's what we're doing. So so today was Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat celebrates many things. There's a there was a first of all, it celebrates the seven. It's about renewal, right? It's about the birthday of the trees, and there was actually a miracle with I don't know if any of you know it. There was a miracle, over the past several years with a date tree, right? They found in excavations of the of Masada, which Masada was in the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, around 70 of the Common Era. And in addition to everything else they found, everything that Josephus wrote that they would find, because he was there, they found dates. They found the seeds of dates from, in a storage area in Masada, and these seeds were 2,000 years old, and so they had them in, like probably in a museum somewhere. And then somebody decided, one of the researchers decided, let's try and plant some of them, and they planted them. And after several months, they thought nothing was going to happen. After several months, one of them started to sprout. And after several years, and then it grew into a tree. And after many years, they realized, oh, this is a male date tree. It's not going to produce fruit. It's a male date tree. And so they're, okay, that's interesting. And then somebody else was doing other excavations near Jericho. And they found they found this excavation was a time period 500 years earlier, which makes it 2,500 years earlier in the time of the first temple. And they found more date seeds. And they thought, oh, okay, we had a miracle one time. It's not going to happen again. They planted those date seeds. They named the first date tree that they planted, the male one, Methuselah, because Methuselah's the oldest living person named, Methuselah. He was 969 years old, yeah. And nobody liked that. And this one they named Hannah. And they planted Hannah, and Hannah grew. And then they took, date trees, you very often pollinate them manually because they don't have to be next to each other. You just take some of the pollen from the male and you bring it over to the female, and she bore fruit. And they were like shocked, absolutely shocked. They were actually eating fruit from a seed that was 2,500 years old, and it tasted great. And the species of date from that time, it tasted extremely like honey, which is interesting because when dates are written about in the Torah, it doesn't talk about dates often, but it talks about honey made from dates, because that's how they made honey back then. Not, bee honey was not so popular. Date honey was extremely popular, and the dates themselves that they made tasted like honey. And so, some people, we might think sometimes, everything is dried up. My life is kaput. Nothing's going to happen. You just never know. You can't tell. Whatever Hashem wants is what's going to happen. And something that is, history, old, dead, you just never know what's going to happen with it because Hashem is in control. Now, I want to tell you the lesson that I tell about Tu B'Shvat that I teach every year to my little kids, because I think it's a good lesson. And you'll forgive me if it's a little juvenile, but I think it's a good lesson. It's all about, Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah of the trees. It's also called the birthday of the trees in Israel. And what happens is this time of year, the sap starts flowing, and in Israel, not in America yet, and the tree can begin to produce fruit because the sap starts to flow up the tree. And so it says in the Torah that a human being is like a tree of the field. And why is it like a tree of the field? And many, 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 many answers are given. And I have an answer. And this is what I tell the kindergartners all the time. We go through different things. And then I said, a tree is an impressive creature. A tree is tall, strong. A good tree is tall, strong, and majestic. We have something in our backyard. May it live for many more years and not fall on our house. It's gigantic. It's just gigantic. It's super impressive. We do absolutely nothing to it. It's just very, very, very impressive. So a person is like a tree of the field. What would happen? I ask my kindergartners, what would happen if a tree was very, impressed with itself and it decided, I don't need anything. These people don't take care of me. I don't need anything. I want to get up and I want to move myself. I'm totally independent. I'm amazing. And if the tree wanted to move itself to another location, and with the children, we pretend our legs, our feet are roots, and we pull them out of the soil and shake off the soil. And then I said, what's going to happen when we walk away? What's going to happen? We're going to topple over right away, because the tree, no matter how big and majestic it is, doesn't realize that, guess what? I get everything from the earth. I'm totally dependent on the earth. I mean, it's true. It's dependent on rain and sun and everything like that. But the minerals, everything comes from the earth. The water comes from the earth. And if it thinks for a second that it exists on its own, it's just going to topple. So a human being is the same thing. We are the same thing. We're impressive people, We walk, we talk, we have all these things going for us. But if we forget even for a second that every single thing that we have comes from Hashem, every single thing we can do, every word that we utter, the ability to go like this, everything comes from Hashem. As soon as we forget, we topple also. The secret to true strength and true happiness is simply remembering that everything I have is from Hashem, And if it's from Hashem, it's good. And hopefully I will see good from everything, even things that I can't even imagine how they could be good. I am going to see good from them, God willing. So I want to tell a little story, a Rebbe story. I think it's a little gem. Hope you enjoy it. This story comes from 1976, and it comes from 1976, and it's a boy. It's about a boy, an Israeli boy named Ayal, and Ayal's father was an Israeli diplomat in New York, and he worked in I think it was Chaim Herzog at that point was also the head of the Israeli congregation, delegation, head of the Israeli delegation. So Yael, this 11-year-old, this was 1976. 1976 was Entebbe. 2 weeks after Entebbe, there was a big party in the Israeli embassy. They were thrilled with what happened. And Ayal was there. And halfway through the thing, he started getting a horrible headache. And he told his father, and his father tried to get some, from the host, some medicine and stuff, but nothing helped the kid. Finally, the father had to leave. And the next day he brought him to a doctor in New York, and the doctor said, a virus. He'll get over it. And Ayal did feel better after a while. But then after a while, the headaches came back, and they were even worse than in the beginning. And they went to another doctor. And the other doctor said, you should have tests run. And they had tests. He gave him a battery of tests. And then Ayal sensed that his parents were under tremendous tension, and he didn't know what it was. And he figured out, maybe it's my test. Maybe they know something I don't know. And he started begging and screaming and yelling. He said, are you not telling me something? Is there something about my test? What happened with my test? And the father said, oh, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And he starts screaming at them. And finally, the father breaks down, starts crying, and said, they discovered a tumor in your head. And he said, but don't worry, you're going to be absolutely fine. It's going to be gone. You're going to be absolutely fine. And because he was 11 and he trusted his father, he was more overcome. He didn't really know about this tumor business, what it was all about, but he had never seen his father cry before, but he trusted his father, and he figured, okay, I'm going to be fine. So what was really happening at the time was that the doctor told the father that his kid has 3 months to live. That's the prognosis. So somebody told the father, you're in New York, go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a blessing. An easy way to get a blessing, and you don't have to get on the calendar for months from now. It's going to be Yom Kippur. On Erev Yom Kippur, the day before Yom Kippur, the Rebbe gives out lekach, honey cake, to all the how many thousands of people who line up to get honey cake and a blessing from the Rebbe. They said go, and so he brought Ayal. The father brought Ayal with him, and they both got a piece of cake and a blessing. Ayal got a blessing from the Rebbe. But they decided they're also going to go. They're going to stay there for Yom Kippur, not just for Erev Yom Kippur. Somebody found a place for them to stay, and they stayed. And they davened in the Rebbe's shul, and then and Ayal fasted just like his father. But Ayal was only 11, and besides he had these horrible headaches, so he only fasted for half a day. And sometime during the day on Yom Kippur, he went back to his host's house to eat, to break his fast, and to rest. And then he decided, it's Ne'ilah time. He decided to go back to the shul where his father was. His father was there the whole time. And by the way, they were very close. They got to be in it, whatever. They were not too far from the Rebbe. And when he got into the shul, it's like everybody was looking at him, and he got this feeling that everybody was waiting for him. And then his father's like yelling, come. And his father told you, the Rebbe wants you. The Rebbe's waiting for you. And he wants you to go up there. And he saw that apparently what had happened was before Ne'ilah, before the Avinu Malkeinu at the end of Ne'ilah, before they sing Avinu Malkeinu, the Rebbe had indicated to his secretary that he wanted all the kids to come up to the Rebbe, and they would all sing it together. They would all be together. And he specifically, he found Ayal's father in the audience, and he said, he motioned to him, "Where's your kid?" And so when he finally came, he came right up to the Rebbe. As soon as he got on the platform with the Rebbe, where the Rebbe was, Rebbe turned around and started Avinu Malkeinu, and everybody started singing. And he heard during the singing of Avinu Malkeinu, he heard like sobbing, and he didn't realize until afterwards that was the Rebbe sobbing. And but at the end of the whole thing, at the end of Ne'ilah, the Rebbe turned around to him and he said, "I will never forget that smile in my life." The Rebbe gave him, he gave him like a big thumbs up like this with a gorgeous smile that he'll never forget in his life. And so Ayal and his father went back and they went to sleep that night. And before they went to bed, Ayal went to his father and he said, "Abba, I don't think anything is wrong with me anymore. I think there's nothing wrong with me anymore." And the father said, "Why do you think that?" He said, I don't have a headache, and I don't even have that nagging, dull pain that I had constantly. I don't have it." And the father said, "Well, we're going for x-rays in 4 days." He said, "No, I want an x-ray tomorrow." And the father says, "We're going in 4 days." "No, I want an x-ray tomorrow." The father managed. They got an x-ray the next day. And the boy was home. And, after the x-rays, the boy went home. And the father came in at one point, and the father went right over to Ayal, and he hugged him and kissed him and hugged him and kissed him. And the father could not speak for a few minutes. He couldn't speak. And then he said, he told him that you have no problem. You have no problem at all anymore. There's nothing there. And they went back to the Rebbe for Hakafos on Simchas Torah. And the Rebbe, not the Rebbe, the father, along with Chaim Herzog, went to the Rebbe to thank him and they said, "Ayal wants to thank you for the miracle." And before Ayal could thank the Rebbe for the miracle, the Rebbe turns around and he says, you have to thank Hashem and always remember that Hashem gave you a miracle. And so anyway, a tzaddik can, there's no blacks and whites, and there's no irreversible in life. There's absolutely nothing. Even if a condition has lasted for a very long time, there is no, this was not such a long time, but there are situations that have lasted for very long times that have completely turned around. I've told the story before, and it's maybe sometime I'll tell it again about my friend who was blind from 17 until 56. And today she's a voracious reader. And before she only saw tan, and now she's a voracious reader. There is, no matter how long-lived a problem is, there is nothing that is there's nothing that is set in stone. And so the important thing to remember, I think, for Faith and Calm is not only to thank Hashem all the time for everything that's going on, and to say, even this, I'm thank you even for the bad stuff, Hashem. I'm thanking you even for the bad stuff, Hashem, because it's from you. And if it's from you, it means it's good. And I'm going to see good from this. I am. And also not to be hard on yourself. Faith and calm is a tricky thing. It's here one day and it's gone the next. And don't beat up on yourself if once in a while you don't have it, because that's the way Hashem designed you. Emunah means, in Hebrew, it means like exercise. It means something you do over and over and over again. And if you fall down, that's part of the process. You pick yourself up and you do it over and over again. Emunah is not something that you achieve and then you sit on your laurels. Hashem didn't design it that way. Hashem designed Emunah to evaporate because he constantly wants you to make a connection with him. So anyway, I want to end there. And if anybody has any questions, I would love to hear them.
I just have to say that the day after Faith and Calm last week, I felt so much better. And now today the test is negative. It wasn't easy having COVID, but it's over with.
Baruch Hashem.
Thank you
Baruch
so
Hashem.
much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I
You're
was like feeling like I had the flu. I came to your class. It was such a good feeling that Hashem, you know, it happened for a reason and he's always with me. And even when I was sick, I had such a strong faith in Hashem, and
Baruch Hashem.
I was like happy throughout the whole time.
Baruch Hashem. That itself is awesome. Okay. So I'm going to wish, if nobody wants to say anything else, I'm going to wish everybody a good night, and thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye. Have a good week. Love you.